Hey everyone, this lecture is on deontological ethics. Just a little etymological, or what the word deontological comes from. Deon comes from the Greek word must, and ontological comes from like being, the study of being. So it's the study of what it means if you must do something. So that's the kind of idea of deontological ethics. So deontological theories, and there are several, they don't think about consequences as their basis of morality. So remember, we were talking about utilitarian ethics. We talked about ethical egoism. Consequentialist ethics they look at the consequences, and rightness and wrongness of an action is determined by the good and bad consequences. However, deontological theories say no, consequences are not the basis of morality. Rather, they focus on duties. What are the duties that we as moral agents have to do, right? They think about the moral actor, the moral agent's motives and intentions. This next slide will help. Think about here these arrows, and what is involved in just even one action. So, there's the character of the person or the agent or the actor. Right? Let's say there's Joe's character, and then I have a motive for doing some action, and then I form the intention. I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to commit X. And then I actually do the action X, and then there are consequences to the action X, right? Now, consequentialism, what consequentialists do when they think of what is right or wrong in a particular action, they only look what comes after the action. They just look at the consequences. But notice this whole chain of what's involved in an action, right? There's character, motive, intention. All these things, are they not important in evaluating whether an action is right or wrong? Isn't someone's motive or intention important? And that's what deontological ethics, or deontologists, or non-consequentialists, what they focus on. They say, look, we have to think about what comes before the act, not only what comes after. Okay, so let's think about motives and intentions. Just very simply, what do they do, right? Do good intentions matter? Does your motive matter? And think about examples you've seen in life, right? Think about maybe if you have a son, right? A young son who went into the kitchen and made a mess, threw flour all over the place, and you come home and you see that, and it's just and you're just kind of mad because you have to clean it up. But what happens when in that little kid, your little son's meager attempt had mixed water with the flour and said, "This is your birthday cake, mommy"? What would happen to your heart right there? You would say, "Oh my gosh, you're the sweetest boy," right? Why? Because intentions matter, right? What's the action? What's the consequence? The consequence of the action is flour all over your kitchen and a badly mixed, clump of flour and water, right? But you see the intention, right? Intentions matter, right? We see this in the law too. Think about it. We, in our law, and probably most of the laws in the world, in the legal system, we make a distinction between manslaughter and murder, right? That if someone accidentally kills someone, right, maybe through driving drunk, or not running a red or something of that sort, that's manslaughter. Whereas murder is you are intending to kill, right? But even within murder, there are degrees of murder: first, second, and third, right? So, for example, there's the kind of first degree, right, where it's the kind where you planned it out. You followed, and you recorded every minute of what that the person you're going to murder, what they do, their schedule, and then you commit that very bad action, right? Whereas, a crime of passion, maybe you come home and you see that your spouse is in bed cheating on you with another person, then you get so mad, you get blinded by that moment that you commit murder. Right? Yes, it's intentional that you committed murder. However, there's a difference because the intention's different, right? The motives are different. What's going on inside of you before the action is different, right? Think about cases of temporary insanity, right? Where what happens, what you've seen, and what you are exposed to is so horrific that you are considered temporarily insane. So what happens, the action that occurs from your body is somehow mitigated, somehow seen that the weight of it is a little less than if it had been where you were of proper mind, right? Why is that? Again, because motives and intentions matter. And that seems right. That seems really right. So this is what deontological ethics or deontologists focus on. This part of ethics is important, and we have to capture that in this theory. Now, the first theory that we're going to talk about is Ross's ethics. Ross is, an Oxford philosopher of the 20th century, early 20th century, and very good philosopher. And what he thought is that there were kind of 7 moral duties, right? And I'll just briefly read them. And these are fidelity, the duty to speak the truth, pay back debts, keep promises and other agreements. There's reparation. The duty is to set right any wrongs that we may have previously done to another, and that is to apologize. That's one way that you can, or you may have to pay a fine or whatever. Gratitude, the duty to make some return for favors, the services rendered to us, that is, you're giving thanks, canoeing oneself to act in a similar way when needed, etc. If your friend helps you to move, help you to move, you're gracious. What does that mean? You'll help them to move, right? Justice, the duty to ensure the fair distribution of goods according to merit. Beneficence, the duty to improve the condition of others. Self-improvement, the duty to improve oneself. And non-maleficence, the duty not to harm or injure others. So he thinks that these are kind of 7. He thinks that there are more too, but these are 7 that seem to be very general. That in essence, think about lying or not lying, that's kind of fidelity, right? Paying back debts is fidelity, right? So not stealing, that would be a type of fidelity, or maybe it would be a kind of reparation or something of that sort. Okay. So a lot of these kind of derived moral principles could be ultimately, according to him, seen in these moral values. All right, so what we see is that Ross's theory is deontological, right? That is, it's the type that is not based on the consequences, right? And it prescribes, it tells us what we ought and ought not to do, and their general moral duties, and it's not based on consequences at all. So what happens? Well, there are kind of stages. So we all have moral duties, and they're initially conditional moral duties. So for example, should I lie? And I'm like, no, I shouldn't lie, because fidelity, right? The principle of fidelity, or the duty of I ought to fulfill a conditional moral duty if there's no other more important moral duty I should fulfill instead. So the condition, we all start out with moral duty. So if I know that I should not lie, and I start off with that, I have a duty not to. If there's nothing that is challenging that, then I should not lie. Well, how about, but that's still a conditional moral duty. Now what happens, what's the next kind of question or thought that happens, or stage that could happen? That is my actual moral duty. And that is when this is the most important duty that applies to a given situation. And this is what you ought to do. Well, what is an actual moral duty? Well, it's a duty that can override another duty. It's the final duty, right? Given the duty, and it it can allow exceptions, but the actual moral duty is where the buck stops, kind of. So, for example, I use this example all the time, and you already know, but Nazis are at my door. I'm hiding Jews in my attic. Remember, my conditional moral duty initially was I should not tell a lie, right? But then now, I am in a situation where there's conflict. I have beneficence, right? I have a duty to uphold human life, to care for them, and now I have that, and I have fidelity, right? Two moral duties that are seen to be in conflict. But what the cool thing about Ross's system is that he allows one duty to override another. So in this case, what will override is that saving the lies will override, telling the truth, right? So it can go that way. Now, what does this show? This kind of system of, conditional moral duties and actual moral duties. That is, Ross is, first of all, an objectivist. That is, and remember, an objectivist holds that the same moral duties holds for everyone. So everyone who is in that same situation of you're hiding Jews in the attic and the Nazis come and they ask are you hiding Jews? Then it's not relativist. There's a right answer to it. It's objectively right that beneficence will overrule fidelity, right, or override. But he is not an absolutist. An absolutist is someone who holds that there's no moral duty can ever be overridden. So if lying is wrong, then lying is wrong, and you can't lie. That's well, what happens when there's a conflict? Well, that's going to be a problem, right? And we're going to get to a way to kind of at least one way to solve that with Kant. Whether he actually solves that or not, we'll see. But yeah. Okay, so what is Ross's view called? He's an intuitionist. And that is, he thinks that sincere and thoughtful persons will simply know what constitutes everyone's moral duties. Now, we know by intuition that the 7 moral duties that Ross brought up are genuine moral duties, and our intuitions also help us determine what conditional moral duties become our actual moral duties in a given situation. So he thinks that our intuition can help us here, and that's what... Now, this is kind of unsatisfying, and there are many ways that it's unsatisfying, but here are just 2 ways, right? One is that it's weak in explanatory power. That is, intuition can help us maybe know our moral duties. Maybe we use intuition to, get a feel for this is what to do and what not to do. But this doesn't explain what makes our duties, right? That is, why is it that our intuitions say that we should lie to the Nazis at the door, right? Why? We want to know why. And this is where intuitionists would say, well, I just have an intuition that's right. That's deeply unsatisfactory, right, in terms of explanatory power. It doesn't explain why. And secondly, there's a practicability problem. Say that really fast. That is, it doesn't seem, or at least it's hard to, there's going to be times when it's going to be practically difficult. So sincere and thoughtful people are going to disagree over fundamental duties or even have conflicting intuitions about the rightness of certain acts. That is, there is going to be deep disagreements, right? There are thoughtful Democrats, and maybe many of you may not think so, but there are very thoughtful Republicans too. In a liberal town like Madison, we may think that Republicans are they're stupid or whatever, or maybe you're a Republican and you think, oh my gosh, those flaming liberals they don't think about what's really practical. There's going to be a time when you realize that there are good people on both sides, thoughtful and smart, but there's a fundamental difference and conflict of intuitions on what makes something right or wrong. Right? What does that mean? That means intuition is not so great a guide, maybe. Right? We may need something else. And that's going to take us to one of the most powerful theories that's still around, and that's Kantian ethics. I hope this helped, and if you have any questions, as always, reach out, and I'll see you online. Bye.